Good morning on this Sunday, January 12th, and welcome to the Georgia Gang. Lawmakers are gearing up for the 2020 legislative session. We preview what's ahead. Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms bundles up and heads to Iowa to campaign for former Vice President Joe Biden. And we discuss Georgia's stance on welcoming refugees into the state. Theron, Phil, Janelle, and Kathy Woolard are all here. The debate and discussion begin right now.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
Tomorrow, lawmakers head back to the Capitol for the 2020 legislative session. Legislative leaders get set to tackle some difficult budget cuts as Brian Kemp, the governor, says he'd like to make good on more campaign promises, like his continued crackdown on gang members.
It doesn't matter if you're in a big city like Atlanta or in Cobb, Gwinnett, DeKalb, or if you're in Augusta or Savannah.
Governor Brian Kemp says gangs impact every corner of the state. This year, he says he wants lawmakers to make it easier to prosecute gang members and human traffickers. Governor Kemp says streamlining the adoption process is also a priority. As of last May, Georgia had nearly 14,000 children in foster care.
We need to relook again at foster care and see how we can streamline the adoption process for foster kids specifically, but adoption in general, and really try to help find these kids loving homes.
No doubt the budget will take center stage as lawmakers grapple with cuts due to a dip in state revenues. House Speaker David Ralston says it's important to remember the budget is more than just numbers and percentages, because those numbers represent programs that are important to Georgians.
We have taken care of our priorities as a state, but we've done it in a very responsible and conservative way. And so I do rankle a little bit when I hear people talk about wasteful spending, because I'm still trying to find it, and I have been for 10 years now.
So the question is, how are lawmakers going to make up for shortfalls besides budget cuts? Now, ever since I started covering the legislature more than 15 years ago, we've heard about gambling, and it could be a referendum, Phil. You think the chances are better than ever now because of what's happening with the budget?
The chances are better than ever. As we're looking at budget cuts, we need new revenue coming into the state coffers. And what's happening is there'll be a constitutional amendment that Senator Brandon Beach and Representative Ron Stevens will be bringing out. It will include all three of these venues, parimutuel, local horse wagering. It would be mobile sports betting, and of course the destination casino resort. And the message is, let the people vote on it. If you're personally opposed to it, okay, but I think it's a great Republican conservative position to have. Let the people vote on this for new revenue.
What do you think, Theron?
I agree with Phil. I think that it's definitely got momentum, but we've seen this movie before.
Right.
I disclosed that a few years ago I represented MGM, and you heard a lot of the same comments from Speaker Ralston and the Lieutenant Governor at the time. We want a referendum, but the challenge is going to be do a lot of these Republicans, knowing that they're going to have a tough re-election ahead of them, want a constitutional amendment around destination casino resort gambling on the 2020 ballot, or do you want it on a 2021 ballot, right? And so politics is going to play a big role in this. But the thing that I think that was very interesting, if you really listen to what Speaker Ralston was saying, and a lot of us know this, is that the one piece of leverage that the State House has on anyone is their ability to be able to control the process on the budget. And so there's a lot of rumblings to get out of the session pretty quickly because folks want to get back to their districts to get in election mode. But I do think that you're going to see a very methodical process, a well thought out process, particularly in the House, about the budget cuts that are being proposed.
And to that extent, Janelle, Governor Kemp said he wants to make good on this promise about the raises for teachers, another $2,000. You heard Speaker Ralston say that wasn't my campaign promise. So it looks like the odds of that passing may not be as good.
Yeah, I know that didn't give me a lot of hope that it was going to pass either. However, I do commend the governor on continuing to stick to his campaign promises. That is what he was elected on. That's what he should do, and he should push for it. And if it is something that can be worked in the budget and worked in there, I think they should.
Kathy.
Well, Lori, one of the things I think we should say right now is that this problem we're having is a problem that Republicans inflicted on themselves. They offered a tax cut when Deal was in office in anticipation of some kind of federal windfall that never showed up. There is somebody deep in the basement of the Capitol right now that was responsible for that math, and people are frustrated. So you're going to see the lieutenant governor is going to be frustrated by this. There's going to be representatives, and then you have your cabinet members who are saying we have cut everything we can. We're cutting into essential services, and that's going to show up and be a problem because there are folks who want to deliver another tax cut, and there's nothing there to give.
And Phil, what about these tax incentives? We talked a little bit about this last week, but especially for the film industry, because when it comes to the numbers, it seems like, it's state auditors versus the Department of Economic Development. State auditors say that the impact that these film tax credits have really been exaggerated across the state.
Well, that was a real shocker to have that state audit, and I think what's going to have to happen is, and I think it could be bipartisan, is that I think it's the only state in the union where you're not capping this money, and it's growing every year. There's obviously abuse, and I think I think it's going to be kept. I think it's a great thing for Georgia's economy, but I think you're going to have to cap it, and I think you're going to have to tweak it so we don't have these abuses that were found. And that's the state that found this.
Kathy, what do you think about the film industry?
Well, I agree with that, and I think in the tweaking we should really talk about expanding it to include the post-production activities that currently aren't included, and those are the ones that create local jobs. Those are the people who are staying here trying, that aren't the movie stars flying into tape and then getting back wherever their home is, and include the music industry, because we have a real industry here in this state that could benefit from that kind of investment. And I think you can make a wash out of it, right? I think you can fix the excesses because we have that experience now and know what that is, but yet really apply this in ways that are going to grow jobs that are going to stay.
And I agree with that. And just for the viewers, I mean, the abuse, one of the abuses that the audit found, of course, was these tax credits were going out of Georgia. Money was going away from Georgia.
Mm-hmm. Right. That's what I was going to say as well, to kind of piggyback off of what Kathy was saying, is that, you just having the title of being a little Hollywood is not what's bringing money into the state, and I do think we need to focus on the aspects of this industry that will actually utilize our businesses and bring revenue to the state. I mean, like, anytime you do anything like this, there should be an opportunity to audit and see how we can revamp it.
All right, Farron, I want to switch gears a little bit because we do have an update on the U.S. Senate race here in Georgia. Of course, this week, Senator Kelly Loeffler was sworn into office. This is what we refer to as race number 2, because she'll turn around and campaign again for November. So, Ed Tarver, you want to give us an update?
Yeah, it was recently reported by the AJC, Greg Bluestein, who's a reporter there, that former state senator, former U.S. attorney in the Augusta region has decided that he's going to throw his hat in the race for the jungle primary for U.S. Senate. And so we've been talking a lot on this program about who's going to emerge, and also you can't leave out Lieberman also, who I think is going to report raising about $750,000. I mean, the report hasn't come out yet. And then there's also rumors that Reverend Raphael Warnock is sort of name is floating out there as well. And
his name has been mentioned before.
But here's what I want to say about this. I just think at the end of the day, we still need to find a moderate consensus Democrat, because some people in my party, they don't like it when I say that, but this is a jungle primary, which means you can't win that election just depending on your base Democratic votes. You got to appeal to some of these Democratic voters that are women, but also you got to appeal to these college-educated, Republican, disaffected, suburban women as well, because you got to be able to make it to the runoff. And there's a lot of speculations that Doug Collins, based on the recent poll numbers that we saw, is definitely eyeing a possibility of getting in this race.
Well, I want to turn also to Senate race number 1, because John Ossoff reportedly could report that he's raised more than $1 million over the last 3 months. We don't know totals from the other candidates yet, but is he looking like he's the one that could face off against Senator Perdue, the Republican incumbent?
Ossoff certainly has the most name recognition right now, and he's got the best fundraising, as you're pointing out. But of course, he's one of the most radical, and so it's funny you're trying to counsel moderation, whatever that means in the Democratic Party. You don't want socialism, I assume, which is good. I'm glad you don't like socialism, but and most of the candidates, including Ossoff and Teresa Tomlinson and Sarah Riggs-Amico, have embraced all of these big tax, big spending things. Ed Tarver actually is an old friend of mine from my Augusta days. He's actually, for the Democratic Party, kind of the dying breed. He's a centrist. Maybe we should be rooting for him. I don't want him to win, but we should root for him.
Centrist, moderate.
He's very well known in Augusta, for sure. Well, coming up, Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms heads to Iowa, stumping for former Vice President Joe Biden. Stay tuned.
Join the discussion on the Georgia Gang Facebook page and watch past episodes on the Georgia Gang YouTube channel.
Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms braving the cold to stump her candidate for president, former Vice President Joe Biden. Darren, she came out as an early supporter, so no surprise she's been campaigning in other states for him too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's crunch time. So if former Vice President Joe Biden has got a chance to become the nominee, he's either got to win Iowa or he's got to place, I think, in the top 5, maybe possibly in the top 3. And so I think it's really unique that that the mayor is going up there at a very pivotal time. I did have a chance to speak to her. She was definitely, getting prepared to brave the cold weather in Iowa. But I think the unique thing is that she's got a full schedule. As you know, it's a caucus state. And so they got her set up in some really key precincts, key areas across the state. So this is really good for her. And I think that she's going all in because he's got to do well there.
Phil, we'll stay on the city of Atlanta and kind of turn to your favorite subject. The former director of contract compliance for the city of Atlanta sentenced to 2 years in prison for wire fraud and filing false tax returns. The U.S. Attorney B.J. Pack says they're still not done in this federal corruption probe. Every day they're looking at new evidence.
This is the third senior official of City Hall over the last year that's pled guilty and going to go to jail. You have construction company CEOs that have pled guilty to taking bribes. U.S. Attorney Pack has said that this is not over. That's no surprise. They're sifting through millions and millions of documents. And so it's a horrible stain on the city of Atlanta. Keisha Lance Bottoms ought to be staying here rather than campaigning for whoever. I just think that you're going to see more indictments coming.
Kathy, you've spent time at City Hall as former city council president. What's your make of all of this? When is the end in sight?
Well, I think 2 big things are going to happen this year. There'll be the trial of Mitzi Bickers and Jeff Jafari, and I think during those trials, you're going to start to find out what's in all those millions of documents that people have been reviewing. I think this one came out of the blue a little bit, right? There wasn't a lot of discussion about this particular sentencing happening, and so when it came out, I think it's some indication that there's new things sort of coming to light, and it is a stain on the city of Atlanta, and I think it's going to be an interesting year, 2020. That's all I can say.
And also, Larry Scott worked in the same company with ex-mayor Kasim Reed's brother.
Yeah, just 2 things I want to clarify for our viewers. And as the mayor goes into now her 3rd year, I do want to report that 90% of her cabinet are new people. So there's only 4 people that are left from the previous administration. And one of the things that my good friend Phil seems to leave out is that, yes, these things are happening, but a lot of the convictions and plea deals that you're seeing now all happen under the Reed administration. And so at a time where I think Kathy makes a good point with the Larry Scott situation was kind of a surprise, because this is a mayor and a council who is in charge for 8,500 employees. And so that one was something that I think that, she would have never been able to know that this gentleman was not filing proper tax returns.
But it did spill over into the Bottoms administration.
But the thing is, I want to report 90%. So at a time, I remember Kathy, when we first came on the show 2 years ago, she needs a clean house. You only have 4 cabinet members left from the Reed administration that are on her staff. And so I just want the viewers to know that she is working diligently to put her people in place to bring more transparency to the city government.
Some might say that's 4 too many. Do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that I think this goes back to something that I've been saying the whole time, is that a lot of times when we think about the city of Atlanta, all we're hearing about is what's happening from the previous administration. We don't hear enough about the positive things that may be happening from this current administration. I think a lot of times because of a lot of the attention is on her as a person and her versus the city, thus her going to Iowa. Not that I'm opposed to any one supporting their candidate. However, if we had more articles showing the positive things that are happening, then maybe we could see what she's actually doing instead of it just highlighting her and all of her accolades and her political gains.
Janelle, you bring up a good point, so I know you're well read, but I'm here today to say that Arthur Blank came out and gave the mayor a full-throated endorsement this week, right? Because she was opening up a housing facility to keep more officers in the city of Atlanta, to give them ability to stay here. Phil's not going to talk about that because it gets covered up with all the corruption stuff.
Arthur's a Democrat.
But to Janelle's point, I think that your heart is in the right place by saying that we know the mayor is doing great things. It's just that the media is not reporting that. They would much rather focus on.
I don't know if we can say we know it, but I'm just saying there's nothing being said that we can talk about.
Well, I just gave you something that was basically there. And dominated the news Thursday and Friday of last week. But now whether people choose to read it or not, that's one thing. But you can't say that this administration is not doing good things.
The good news for the city of Atlanta is there's a more muscular city council since she became mayor, and thank goodness for Felicia Moore and a majority of people that have been pushing her for reforms and transparency. She's been dragged kicking and screaming to do all of this.
Yeah, we don't hear enough from the city council, in my opinion, as well. I think we do. I think we do hear a lot from Mayor Bottoms, but we don't hear enough from the city council.
No, I give them a lot of credit. But no, this is a very important topic. I think that it's very inaccurate to say that this administration not doing anything. I think what you got to say is that whether you choose to read it or embrace it or amplify it is one thing. And I think that the council is a very divided council. You have a confluence of legacy members with new members who have come on with a lot of enthusiasm. But I do think that at the end of the day, you talk about transparency. We don't give the mayor enough credit that are basically creating this public trust transparency commission, which, by the way, was headed up by Leah Sears. And so it's election time. You're going to see me be more and more aggressive.
Right.
She had to do something in light of a federal corruption probe.
I mean, I was coughing, so I couldn't interrupt you guys. I know.
And you have gone on and on.
Because I'm getting ready to get started if you don't get this under control. You know?
I'm having a coughing fit, so I couldn't interrupt them. But coming up, what will Governor Brian Kemp say about allowing refugees into Georgia? We'll be right back after I cough.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Email them at georgiagang@foxtv.com.
Okay, we're back, and Phil gave me a cough drop, so hopefully that helps. Well, according to the AJC, Georgia will soon have to say whether the state will accept refugees for settlement and give written permission to the Trump administration. No word yet on Governor Brian Kemp's decision. Janelle, we're talking about people who have officially come here to the U.S. We're not talking about folks who have illegally crossed the border.
Yeah.
Weigh in on this.
Absolutely. I want to definitely highlight that there is a difference between refugees and illegal immigrants. And while I am totally opposed to illegal immigration, I will definitely say that when it comes to the refugees, my only issue is we have to make sure we keep the main thing. And I think about our veteran services. And whenever refugees are getting more financial support, emotional support, and all the other support than we see in our veterans, that is a problem for me. You know, my husband's a veteran. My stepson is currently in the Air Force. I will always put veterans first. So if Governor Kemp feels that the refugees that wish to come here should, that's his decision. But then let's also talk about it from a flip side, which is that there are a lot of refugees who do not want to leave their countries. They want safe zones inside their countries so they don't have to leave all that they know. So I do think that we need to look at safe zones as well.
Kathy, weigh in on this, because when you have cities like Clarkston here in Georgia, it does make a big difference.
Well, it does, but Clarkston is an official refugee resettlement area, and they have embraced that and done, I think, a really, really good job of it. It's important to understand we're talking about around 1,200 refugees that are sort of hoping to be able to resettle here in Georgia, and they get most of their support from churches, from nonprofits, from private philanthropy that offer them that support. They have to come here and get settled and get a job and support themselves within months. They do not get.
Well, what you're forgetting, though, is it sometimes is a racket with that. You have to pay per head by refugees. We've been a dumping ground in DeKalb County for about 25 years with refugees through the State Department, through all these administrations. Even Governor Deal said, wait a minute, enough is enough a few years ago. And I think enough is enough. I'm in favor of legitimate refugees coming in, but it's become a racket, and I think we've had enough. We've had thousands have come in. They're not assimilating. I can take you to areas of DeKalb County that are controlled by Somali gangs where there's crime. The people, the refugees themselves, it's a disservice to them.
Yeah, I have to add, I sat down with Mayor Ted a few years ago, and we talked about what was happening in Clarkston. And I will say the only issue I had was when I asked him whether or not, after 6 months of them searching for jobs and wanting to assimilate, whether or not their financial assistance would be cut off. And his words to me were that they would not necessarily be cut off. It could be, but we don't want to just send them back. So we have to kind of continue supporting them. And again, that's when I feel like, you know, yes, I understand that, but whenever you have financial assistance and government money going towards a community of people that are not assimilating as properly as they should, then that becomes a problem for the state.
I have to have the last word in this. A lot of what just got said is not true. My family's been involved in refugee resettlement in DeKalb County for years. My dad and mom have personally participated in welcoming and resettling probably a dozen families through their church during that period of time.
Are they assimilating?
They are.
No.
They are. No,
They're
they
not
are.
assimilating.
Let me finish what I'm saying. They are assimilating.
I've been there.
They come in, they go to work, and we have watched literally generations of these families over the time that my family's been involved. They've been in our house, they've come to Thanksgiving, and they are wonderful people who are just trying to make a life for them and their kids, and they do a great job, and we should welcome them and hope that they choose Georgia to come because they really do contribute.
Why can't we resettle? Why can't we resettle a lot of these people though near their home countries?
Right.
Why does America always have to do this? Why does Uncle Sap always have to pay for all of the services?
Yeah, and we're not speaking to all the refugees, but there are a number.
All right, we're going to move on to another critical issue in Georgia. A state study committee looking into Georgia's maternal death rates is recommending extending Medicaid coverage to women 1 year following childbirth. Now, this is a crucial issue for Georgia because our maternal death rates are so high, but even Speaker Ralston has said this will be a tough year to expand Medicaid. Theron.
Yeah, and I think that, we're not doing a good enough job as a state of making sure that we are taking care of these women who need this Medicaid assistance. But more particularly, these are poor areas and women, and also these are areas that are very diverse and more minorities. And so I think while Speaker Ralston, who by the way introduced a extended leave package for people who go out on a maternity leave and paternal leave, I think that they're going to have to find a way to deal with this crisis, because that's exactly what it is. I mean, when you read the statistics about the maternal death rates in this state, I mean, we should be ashamed. I mean, I know we like to pride ourselves on a lot of things, but this is an issue that I think that you can find some bipartisan support. And at the end of the day, we can find money to support these women.
Janelle, last word on this. I mean, can we afford not to do this?
Yeah, absolutely. So I when I look at this, as long as the money is going towards education services, and what I mean by that is that we know healthy eating, healthy habits, things of that nature. I will not by any means say that all of the maternal deaths are because of a lack of personal care. I do think that there are some instances where there's neglect happening and a lack of attention to our moms. But I feel like most importantly, we need to educate our moms on how to take care of themselves apart from different medicines and pharmaceutical help.
All right, well, coming up, we'll have winners and losers. Stay tuned.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
These guys are saying that I was getting all choked up over what y'all were saying. But let's start with Theron.
Good. Well, I have a present from my good friend, Phil Kent. This is a Georgia Trend magazine that I promised to give to Phil last week. So, Phil, here's a nice handwritten note from Mayor Bonhams.
That is very nice.
It basically says, to Phil, although you will never probably say it, I know that you love me. So
I'm getting emotional here. This is
don't choke up.
I've never heard of this magazine, but anyhow, that's great.
But also, I want to give a big shout out to Fulton County District Attorney Paul Howard and Tyler Perry. You may have seen this week he did a wonderful event at Tyler Perry Studios. There was a man who had been to jail, released from parole, basically went back to jail because he just didn't have the money to pay his fines, and so Tyler Perry gave him a job right on the spot. So definitely want to make D.A. Howard and Tyler Perry a winner. And also, Ivory Clifton in Georgia, University of Georgia, was the first African-American dean there, passed away, unfortunately. He's a steward in the Athens community. He was in agriculture Agriculture and Environmental Sciences Department, went on to be a professor emeritus. And then lastly, I want to make my loser, Congressman Doug Collins. I mean, the comment that he made about basically saying that Democrats are in love with terrorists, you can be partisan and not be reckless. And I think that was a very, very reckless statement that he made on Fox News Channel.
Phil.
Well, my winner is going to be Governor Brian Kemp. We have the State of the State coming up, and the state is in pretty good shape economically thanks to previous Republican administrations. And this one, I'm really glad that he's doing a focus on increased anti-gang initiatives. For example, tweaking the evidence code, giving more tools to prosecutors. There's over 70,000 gang members and growing in Georgia. We have weak anti-gang initiatives, unfortunately, in Atlanta. We can talk about that another day, but he's a winner, and I think that actually we talked about John Ossoff. I think he could be a winner by eclipsing the other Democrats with his fundraising.
Janelle.
Awesome. So my winner, I have three quick winners and three women. The first is Senator Kelly Kelly Loeffner. She is quickly rising to my favorite list. She recently, in her first week of being sworn in, she co-sponsored 6 bills, 3 of which were pro-life bills, so that's awesome. Also, Joan Carr, her chief of staff, she was named chief of staff to Senator Loeffner. I wanted to point out that she would be the first chief of staff to have 3, she was under 3 U.S. senators from the state of Georgia, or the same state, from different parties, and from both genders. So good kudos to her. And lastly, Claire Bartlett, who's the president of the Fulton County Republican Women's Group. For over two years, she moved the membership from 20 people to 150 plus people. I'm a member. I hope all Fulton County women join the organization.
All right. I think we all agree Joan was a great choice to stay on under
Absolutely.
Isaacson's staff. Kathy.
I don't know. My winner might have to be you, Lori, for getting through that coughing spell. But I'm gonna give a shout out to Stacey Abrams and Fair Fight Action. They reported that they raised over $16 million in the last 6 months with $11 million cash on hand. And most importantly, really doing the hard work of funding the expansion of voter protection efforts around the country and funding that effort and lending their kind of intellectual expertise to that. And so I think we'll all be better off for that. I think the big loser this week is probably Kirby Smart. You know, he lost his quarterback, doesn't have one on the horizon. I'm too old to play, so I don't know what's going to happen.
All right. Well, thank you all so much. Thank you all for putting up with my coughing fit and supporting me. And thanks for the cough drop, Phil. You're my winner this week. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.
The opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the panelists appearing in this program.